when you talk about great horror movies or great movies in the genre in general, The Exorcist is usually one of those movies that is immediately mentioned by everybody because this thing changed the landscape of cinema and, of course, horror cinema by default.
Yeah.
It was a life changer, man, and it was written by the man himself. That's right, Groucho Marx on steroids, nay, Geraldo Rivera, possessed by Pazuzu himself.
Yeah.
William Peter Blatty, as you can see here, in the worst
The Blattmeister.
picture imaginable.
Yeah, full back.
Yeah, the Blattmeister, as you call him. Yeah, Blattorama to his friends. Yeah. Blatty was, he was a legend, secured since The Exorcist. He wrote the script for the original, but then they made this shitty sequel, a little thing called Exorcist 2, The Heretic.
Yeah, it was...
Not good.
No.
Not the apt way to follow up that classic.
They blotted that bad baby out and it wasn't good.
Yeah, nobody was pleased with that, man. Nobody. I don't think there was one person that was like, this is a cool movie. Blatty certainly was unhappy, but that was to be resolved, at least in some people's eyes. I don't know what you thought about this. This was your first time watching the official sequel as far as Blatty is concerned, as far as a lot of people that are into horror, into The Exorcist in general are concerned, and it is called The Exorcist 3. Sadly.
That's it.
Because that acknowledges part 2.
Yeah.
But really, it should have been called Legion because that is the book it was based on. And it was written by Blatty himself. And yes, it is kind of a sequel to the story in the original Exorcist in the sense that one of the main characters, Lieutenant Kinderman, which in the movie was kind of a smaller character, but in the book was a bigger character, is the investigative force behind some mysterious events going on here that bring back shreds of the past for the detective and are connected to the events that happened in The Exorcist. That being said, The Exorcist 3 was compromised during its production stage. So Blatty himself was not satisfied with the final product.
Oh.
But the movie man went on to cult fame. And its cult has grown substantially. To the point where eventually even the director's cut was released, which you haven't seen yet, so we're not going to discuss that. I insisted that if you're going to see it, you're going to see the theatrical version first.
Yeah, you were dumping ass on that director's cut.
I'm not dumping ass on it. I'm just saying as a sequel to The Exorcist, the theatrical version is the best way to see it. As more of a movie that's more akin to the novel, which is kind of a movie set in the universe of The Exorcist with characters from it more than anything.
Exorcist verse?
The Exorcist verse, if you will. The ECU, if you will. Then, yes, the Legion cut would be the better one. But today you saw The Exorcist 3 for the first time. We're going to talk about it. I'm interested to see what you think, man. This is kind of a divisive movie for a lot of people. Up front, I'm just going to tell you I love the movie. I think it's one of the best sequels ever made. I also think that theatrical version is one of the few times where studio interference ended up giving us something uniquely good, Even though, yes, a lot of Blatty's original vision was kind of cast aside, he still had to rewrite it to fit this new thing. So it's still kind of his version of the events in a sense. But anyway, just tell me straight off the top, did you enjoy the movie? Did you not enjoy the movie? Where are you at with this flick?
I don't want to jump the gun.
Don't grade it. Just give me a kind of a vibe.
Here's the thing. I don't want to go crazy with it because I did just see it and it's really fresh in my mind. But I think I liked it more in the first one.
You know what? That was my reaction the first time I saw it. I immediately fell in love with the movie. It's stunning in its own ways. It's got its own visual language, and yet, of course, it owes so much to the original. And it's pretty astonishing. This wasn't Blatty's first movie. In fact, he, if I remember correctly, he was also the director for The Ninth Configuration, which is also in the Exorcist universe.
The ECU.
Remember in The Exorcist 1 where Regan tells that they're having a party and there's an astronaut over at the party and he tells them you're going to die up there? The Ninth Configuration kind of centers around that character, and it's more of a comedy for those of you
What
going,
the?
I'm gonna go check that movie out right now and be scared. No, it has darkly comedic aspects.
I had to throw in a Danny there.
You had to, yes, and my ear paid the price.
Yeah.
But speaking of our ears paying the price, this was a loud movie.
Yeah, it really was.
Just saying that.
It also, we saw it on Amazon Prime, and it had this kind of like deafening hum throughout.
Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about this movie. I'm glad that you enjoyed it quite a bit. Upon rewatching it, I think that maybe it'll level out. This is a movie that I like as much as the original, personally. But I mean, it wouldn't strike me as strange if it continued to be the one you like the most, because it is fucking awesome.
I think the first one's a better made movie. I just think this one tickled my pickle a little more, at least right now.
For those of you that haven't seen it, The Exorcist 3 is not a traditional exorcism movie.
Yeah.
In fact, the exorcism originally wasn't even in the movie and is a very small part of the movie. It is more of a murder mystery with supernatural overtones.
Yeah.
And that's really at the core of the picture. That's really at the core of the book, and that's really what the book is about. But it does center on this character, Lieutenant Kinderman, and he is fleshed out a lot more than he was in the original movie. As aforementioned, he was a big character in the book. There was entire subplots with him that were not in the movie for obvious reasons. It would have taken away from a lot of stuff. But enough was left in the original Exorcist to let us know that he had a friendship with Father Karras. And that carries on. And Father Karras and the priest that eventually we see him at the end of the movie with, that carries on into the events of Exorcist 3. And yes, strange murderers that seem to mimic the calling card of a serial killer named the Gemini Killer start popping up again, and Lieutenant Kinderman has to find out
what's going on.
What
up with that?
As the title would betray, it's not just a simple serial killing massacre going on. Oh no, there's something spooky.
Yeah, I have a theory that it's a damn.
So give it to me, man. What's your first pro of this movie?
Pro. I'm gonna give you two right off the bat. But the first big one is that main character. He's pretty rad.
George C. Scott, man.
He rivals Atkins in my mind. He's Atkinian, and he's pretty damn funny, just because he's so cool. So yeah, he's a big pro.
Yeah, man, George C. Scott, and what's got to be my favorite role of his ever. I mean, he is Lieutenant Kinderman to me. There was just something about him that's like a guy you want to be type of character.
It's like an old. This movie as a whole, but him especially, felt like an old timey movie. You know, like a I don't know, like an old mystery type film. Which, I mean, it is basically what it is, but the structure of it and the way it presents itself feels like it doesn't feel like it was made in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true, man. And that's good because it really feels in visual tandem with the original one, which looks like a 70s movie would look.
Yeah.
This one still looks like, in reality, the 80s kind of still were bleeding out those elements out of style and shit, you know. It wasn't all burning trash cans and Michael Jackson jackets. Let's face it.
That would be rad though.
George C. Scott in the jacket.
Backlit.
But he's so awesome, man. He's just such a great character. The dialogue in this is awesome, especially for him. So that's a good call on that first pro. What's the other one you were thinking about?
The other pro is, I think there's maybe like 3 or 4 scenes, maybe more, where it's him just talking to the demon guy. And those were pretty much huge pluses. The movie could have sucked, and those scenes would have been worth it.
And it's a brilliant use of acting with dialogue that could be dangerously close to excessively expository.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is what we find out about how we got from part 1 to part 3 is mainly delivered. It's mainly delivered by dialogue provided by Brad Dourif, Chucky himself.
The Chuckmeister.
The Chuckarama. Yeah. Is what they say.
I also want to say I think Brad Dourif could have played a really good Joker.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there. He was pretty great in this.
Well, let me finish this thought real quick. To get to that point that I was trying to get across was that it's incredibly hard to write dialogue that's so full of exposition and not make it sound lazy.
Yeah.
This movie has a lot of restraint, so that dialogue fits into that restraint, and it really is eerily delivered by Brad Dourif, and is so well delivered that there's a credibility to it that makes it scary to hear. Because instead of seeing what happened in the spirit realm, if you will, for lack of better words, in between the events of part 1 and 3, it's just told to you in such a convincing fashion.
Yeah.
You know, that you're at this crossroads. Do you believe? Do you not believe? You know, what? And if you do believe, it's scary. It's scary, you know?
And it really plays into that. Like, what you think, what you imagine is scarier than what they can show you, basically.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. And so that's a great call, man. That's a fantastic call. Again, very hard to do that. Exposition is usually frowned upon because, again, it's considered a lazy way out to say shit. But in some occasions, it is an essential tool to get something across. This is one of them. This movie has a lot of moments where you're like, wow, that is an absolutely brilliant example of this. That for exposition. So my first pro is this has one of the best plotted and blocked and shot jump scares in cinema history, in my opinion. If you haven't seen it, we'll try to get a clip of it here. But just real brief, it builds up with what you expect, especially at the time. The 80s had passed. It was the early 90s. People were used to jump scares, cheap jump scares, no less. It builds on expectation. And I'm talking about the scene in the hallway in the hospital. We have a static shot, and it just keeps
super long.
Yeah, it's very long, and it just keeps on building on the expectation. It plays on your expectation, then it delivers on the expectation, and it feels, or not feels, but it delivers in that cheap way, and then it relieves you of the tension. But you know inherently that there's still something coming because that shot is still held. And then it introduces other people, which relieves you again. And then it takes the people away, which brings the tension back. And then finally it gives you the jump scare. And it's just so expertly done, man.
And I'm sure some of you might have seen this because it's been passed around Facebook. I saw it recently. And it's been used as like this was an actual scare they used in Exorcist 3. But I'm like, yeah, but if you see it in the movie, yeah, it looks ridiculous when you just see it out of context without the build-up. But when in the movie, it actually works because it is such a long shot and you're just kind of like on the edge, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you might have seen it, but in the movie, it works.
Oh, and it works wonderfully, man. It's such a well shot and plotted and everything jump scare. And just proof that jump scares aren't always cheap, even when they toy with that concept. In fact, this flies in the face of a cheap scare by using it and then turning it on its head and just drawing you along. Brilliant. I love that, man. Give me another pro for on your end there.
I think
I like how that was preceded by a gurgling burp.
Yeah, I think the I don't want to say it's music, but I guess the sound design. It was really eerie. I just like the weird use of that kind of, I don't know what you would call it. Just kind of like a sound, basically, instead of music. It's just like humming, basically.
The movie basically has an aural landscape.
Yeah.
That comes and goes rather than
it's not music. Yeah.
Prevalent throughout. Yeah, and in fact, it kind of teases you at the beginning. I don't know if you noticed this.
And then it changes it.
Yeah, it starts with Tubular Bells, which is the infamous Exorcist theme, quote unquote. Which, by the way, if you go and check out the entire length of Tubular Bells, it wasn't written for the Exorcist.
Yeah, I know, it's just like a song.
It just turns into the weirdest shit ever. But the point is, Tubular Bells, we know as the Exorcist theme. It starts with that, and then abruptly ends and introduces these sound elements.
It's kind of
which are pervasive throughout.
Yeah, it's kind of like the hum track in Evil Dead 2, only a lot louder and a lot more effective.
Yeah.
And it's not used super heavily, but when it does happen, it kind of makes things creepier.
Yeah, it really does.
And the fact that there's rarely any music kind of helps it. So that was pretty rad. I like that. I like when when they build an atmosphere with music or lack thereof, I guess.
That's a great pro. Another pro for me would be the dialogue in this movie is absolutely awesome, and not only with George C. Scott, which is, I mean, just a winner, but in general, Brad Dourif, Jason Miller, they really do wonders with what they're given. If you haven't seen the movie, spoiler right here, you might want to skip ahead 10 seconds. Jason Miller's in the movie, which basically reveals what the fuck the movie has to reveal. And they credit him at the beginning, which I always found confounding. Anyway, we're back. These two guys, Brad Dourif and Jason Miller, do such a wonderful job with what is given to them. Especially Dourif, man.
Yeah, he's really good.
The biggest pro for the Legion cut is that the Jason Miller stuff is virtually non-existent, if not at all. It's more heavy on Dourif. So that's a humongous pro. However, I feel that the theatrical cut has this element that kind of added a visual, palpable... Yes, it drew a clear line as to what was going on, but I think we needed that in this movie to really amp up... Because, you know, we weren't going down the same faith and doubt paths of the first one. This was different. Kinderman was a creature of a different cloth, if you will. So we didn't need to have those doubts. So to have these dual actors portray something and so well was really interesting, and really sold a lot of the movie for me personally. So that's a pro for me. What do you got, man?
I like that it's not like gory in any way. It's like you said, it's really restrained. You only get really one shot of gore in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you kind of see hints of the murder scenes, but even then, they don't really show them. So I like that because it fits the movie.
It's interesting to note that the exorcism sequence was pretty much the studio's doing. They were like, yo, what's up with an exorcism in an Exorcist movie? So this is why I say that this is one of those elements or times when, yeah, I kind of agreed with the studio. The Legion cut has its merits, obviously. I don't hate it. I like it quite a bit. I just think in terms of connective tissue to the previous movie, that really added that layer on top of what was already there to make it a much more, but to gel much better. Yeah. And especially to give credence to the idea of the others and Pazuzu wanting revenge and
it's John Cena, by the way.
Yeah, and many more spirits in play, you know.
Yeah.
I think adding that element and creating a history that's not really acknowledged beyond a couple of scenes previous to the Exorcist sequence really benefited the villains, if you will, the spirits in the movie, more than the Exorcist sequence, or more than the Exorcist himself. So that scene does have the gore that you have mentioned, and I could see the distaste Blatty had for that. There was no need for the gore.
Yeah.
However, it's done in the context of an exorcism.
Yeah.
So it adds a level of kind of like a disturbing element to it. So I thought, actually, that was pretty cool. I really like that. The visuals during the exorcism, too, are pretty damn neat. In fact, a lot of weird visuals are employed throughout.
Yeah, and this is interesting. It kind of... Another thing that made it seem to me like a more of an old timey movie is that there is some of those like dream sequences, and there is not a huge amount of effort to light things in a way that make it look super cinematic.
Right.
They just kind of present them,
mm-hmm.
But it works, you know, and that's something that they would do in like old timey movies. There just be the effect is there, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens here. They won't light certain things, but when they do, it works because of how they presented everything up to that point.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it was kind of weird, you know, like specifically the dream sequences were just kind of there.
Like you said previous, it was more like an old school cinema charm to it, which oddly, since it is kind of incredibly staged at times, but not at the same time. The fact that sometimes, like I'm talking about, like the dream sequence in heaven.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking about.
It looks incredibly staged because obviously it had to be, but at the same time, it's shot in that kind of bare bones, old school 70s cinema style that at the same time it just looks like something that you would see if it was right there in front of you.
Yeah.
It kind of creates this weird juxtaposition and feelings.
Yeah.
That
and then
kind of adds to the air of weirdness.
Yeah, especially when there's the more artistically shot shit later on, like in The Exorcist and The Exorcism and the shot with the hag and the. By the way, top 10 hags.
There's some good hag action in this.
So yeah, it's interesting the way that shit was shot. I don't know how we got to that again. By the way.
Yeah, man. Very, very, very cool that you mentioned that. Of course, the Exorcist sequence has to be talked about, and I already mentioned that there's some unique visual aspects to it here. It is a very brief sequence in this movie, and some might find it jarring, and I get that. Because the Exorcist is literally a minimal plot point.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's used more to underline, or ultimately, it underlines more about the demon than about the Exorcist. And it literally, like, you kind of, I wouldn't say you forget, because I didn't forget, but you kind of, quote, forget that the Exorcist is there, because he's mentioned in one scene.
Yeah,
you see
exactly.
you see him getting prepared in the other.
That's kind of like one of the, I wasn't going to call it a con, but that is something that I could see someone calling a con.
Right.
Because, yeah, it is a little odd where he'll just appear and, like, I got what it was doing. But, like, I think, like, the first two appearances, I was kind of like, wait, what is this guy?
Yeah.
What's going on with him? And then it became more and more clear, and you're like, okay. And then when the exorcism happened, you're like, okay, it makes sense. It's just at first it's a little odd, even though they do mention him through dialogue and all that shit.
It might seem jarring. To me, it's a plus because it is jarring.
Yeah.
It's a critical point with Kinderman facing off against the bad guy. And then the bad guy's gone, and you're like, what? Why would he just leave? Boom. Cut to the Exorcist. Awesome. And yes, you could point out stuff like, who let him in? Why did he just walk in? Little
That's
things
exactly
like that.
what I thought. I was like, man, what the hell?
Yeah, little things like that could be pointed out. But again, it works.
It was pretty awesome.
It works on a visual, almost gut level, like a visceral level.
Plus, he kind of looked like Data.
Yeah. And it gets the point across quite well. Like, here we are. And these are ancient enemies or old enemies facing off each other again.
That was cool.
Enough to distract each other. That was cool,
and
man.
And then he gets
really
freaking owned, like, instantly.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, oh, shit.
It was a new way to portray an exorcism. Different and unique on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I really actually think that's a pro in my case. Anything else you got?
No, I was just. I'll say this: I mentioned that Brad Dourif would be a great Joker because the scenes between him and the cop guy, where he had that Batman Joker feel from The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Just where these two people are basically just talking, and it's super interesting. So I guess that would be another plus. It was cool. It reminded me of something badass.
A final pro going hand in hand with that is, and we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, is how some shots are staged in this movie. There's some beautiful shots, especially in context of what's being portrayed, that, if you're keen to notice them, though they're greatly pleasing. And one of my favorites is during that conversation between Kinderman and our villain, portrayed by Brad Dourif. And they're in his cell, and he's in the straitjacket, and Kinderman is opposite him in a padded cell. And there's these two shafts of light lighting both of them. And it just really, it says everything you need to say. It's like that shot of Father Merrin facing the statue of Pazuzu at the beginning of Exorcist. It's brilliant. It says everything visually. And then they knock you in the nuts with this exchange that somehow manages to be fantastic.
And it's really long.
Yeah,
it
takes
takes
really long.
A huge part of the movie.
Later,
it happens twice or 2 or 3 times. I don't know exactly how many times.
And then later they use those shafts of light to visually tell you certain things as well. So there's a lot of shots like this in this movie where visually they get across some points, or it just looks great and it communicates so much. That's a big, big plus for me. I absolutely love that about this movie. So let's talk about some cons here. Give me a con if you got one.
I can't think of any.
I'm going to shoot one off, and maybe you'll think of one. As aforementioned, the kind of jarring nature of the movie might not be up everyone's alley, even though I like it. But I will say this. The first time I watched this movie, I absolutely loved it, but I still had this feeling where I almost felt, I wouldn't say confused, but lost at times. Because the movie does go at a steady clip, and it doesn't hold your hand for the first part. You just kind of drop back into the world of these people and expected to understand.
Assumes you know stuff.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that's a con to the max. I'm just saying that you got to be attentive when you watch the movie. And the first time I watched it, I wasn't attentive, and it was about 30 minutes into the movie where everything had locked into place in my brain. Because they do just drop you into this place, and it goes from one scene to another and another and another without telling you, like most movies normally do. Oh, look, this is this character, and this is what's going on. It's just kind of like boom, boom, boom. This is what's going on. You're getting the dialogue. Da 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 da. It's not a Michael Mann level type of fucking confusing. Don't get me wrong. It's just it might be if you're not prepared to pay attention 100%, it might be a little weird for you. So might be a minor con if that's your thing. Do I think? No, and do I think that takes away from the movie? No. And have I ever experienced that again since the first time watching it? No. I love it even more every time I watch it. I didn't watch it but like about a year ago with Spielbergo again, and every time the movie just fucking is just awesome. So no, it's not a con for me personally, but it might be something that you might pay attention to if that's your thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I mentioned that, the Exorcist guy just kind of showing up, I could have counted as a con, because there is that kind of like, what the hell's going on, for the first couple times he shows up, but ultimately I don't think it is a con like you, so I don't know if I want to put it in there. I will tell you a con. That is, and it has nothing to do with the movie, but we saw it on Amazon Prime, and there was this hiss throughout, so that was a con for me.
That might have to do with the remastering or lack thereof.
Yeah, I think there was. I think it was. So it's not really a con.
Not really a con. But
couldn't think of any.
There's a little hiss action going on in the soundtrack. Sometimes there, sometimes not.
Yeah. A little distracting.
But yeah, but anyway, I don't really have any.
Oh, you know what? A really small con, and it's more of a plus because it was cute. Those cobras were really stiff, and they were kind of cute looking.
Yeah, there's just some bunch of snakes appear, namely cobras.
King cobra.
During the exorcism sequence, and I realized a lot of people are grossed out by snakes, or they're just inherently afraid of them. Cute.
It's got to be like the cutest snakes they got for this movie.
Yeah, cute ass snakes, man. I mean, the scene still got across the
but
fearsome
same time,
qualities it was going for. But at the same time, I want to pet them.
I couldn't contain my when they appeared.
But yeah, man, I don't really have any cons for this movie. I think this.
Got a major one.
I like how I try to wrap that up, and just then
Fabio
is in this movie as an angel, and it's not like a cameo or anything.
He's just there.
It's Fabio playing an angel, which kind of makes sense. But now that we know who Fabio is, you're kind of like, oh man, Fabio's in this movie. I mean, they knew who he was back then, but still.
Yeah, still.
Also, Patrick Ewing is an angel in this.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
So if you're like still living in the 80s and 90s, you might recognize those people and be like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And that was a guy that was there. Larry King is in it. Just...
He is?
Yeah.
What the shit?
So that's just weird little shit but it's not distracting. No. It's just odd to notice.
Yeah, Fabio.
But anyway, Fabio in general is just a con.
Yeah.
It's Fabio. I just envy him. Sad.
Yeah.
Remember that time when he was almost gonna be Thor?
Oh man, imagine that shit.
That would have been awful. But anyway, let's talk about this movie in terms of the final score and final thoughts. Give it to me.
This is kind of like an instant favorite for me. I think it's in the top 5 atmosphere movies for me because it really builds one and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a freaking 9.5. I'm leaving the 0.5 just in case I ever see the other cut and like it more. Well, apparently I won't, but you never know.
You may. You never know.
No.
I like the other cut, but anyway, I'm gonna have to give it a 9.8.
Oh shit!
It is that like a few tweaks here and there, and this would have been perfect for me. But I do think this is one of the greatest sequels ever. It's amazing. It's awesome. I'm glad that it exists because I can ignore part 2 now. It's just fantastic. George C. Scott alone would have made this movie for me. But on top of that, we had all this other confluence of awesomeness. Brad Dourif, Blatty directing, the writing, the dialogue, the imagery. Like you said, the genuine ominous feel throughout. Some legitimately eerie, skin-crawling sequences. A hag. I mean, come on, man.
Couple of hags.
Yeah, a couple of hags. The fastest shooting of someone ever.
Damn it.
Imploring to be shot.
Yeah, you didn't even hesitate, dude.
And it just has so many great links to the first one that it actually feels like a sequel that matters. And it doesn't have to retread anything in the first one. And when it does do something, it doesn't borrow it so much as adds to the substance of the first one. So everything about this movie just hits, a positive for me, man. It's awesome. I love it. It's a underappreciated classic to this day. It still doesn't get the recognition it deserves, unfortunately, and I blame that on The Exorcist 2.
Yeah.
And then of course the what followed that only buried this deeper because people weren't receptive of the beginning or Dominion, which were prequels, so it just went further ignored. Well, here's your chance, folks. Go and see it because it's amazing. It's great. It's classic. If you like the original, I can't see you not liking this Exorcist 3.
Give a little love to Black.
Yeah, he's dead now,
Rip.
but maybe he'll break into Al Capone's vault.
You think him and Al Capone are hanging out in the afterlife?
Definitely.
With Pazuzu?
Yeah. Put them in hell.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah, wow.
Anyway.
To be fair.
Let us know what you think about this movie, and if you haven't checked it out, go check it out now. Hit like, share, subscribe to the notification buttons because we're out.